When we look at the first part of this whole story, it really has to do with the indigenous peoples themselves. A massive land grab took place in the late 19th century. In 1899, Treaty 8 was signed. It's now been since proven by historical experts pointing out that those treaties were fraudulent. They were signed by other people and really had nothing to do with what the people at that time said that they were signing. They thought they were signing a peace and friendship treaty. As it turned out, the fraudulent treaties that they ended up signing were understood to be a transfer of land to the federal government at that time. After that, there were federal and provincial squabbles over land grabs, and eventually the industry moved in and really, for all intents and purposes, taken control of the land, and that's the kind of picture that we now find ourselves in. The Athabasca tar sands, in terms of its geological deposits, amount to something like 2.5 trillion barrels of oil in the entire Athabasca region. 2.5 trillion barrels of oil. However, only 175 to 200 billion barrels of oil are actually at the present time recoverable given current technologies. It is estimated, though, that we may be able to extract, or they may be able to extract something like 315 billion barrels by the time that they're finished. The kind of methodology that's used is, on the one hand, strip mining for the bitumen that lies just below the surface and can be gotten at quickly that way. The other kind of process, however, that will be used much more extensively in the future, because it covers much more of the deeper bitumen that lies below the surface, and that is the in situ process, which involves steam, injecting steam down deep and liquefying the bitumen so that they can bring it up, and then going through the various upgrader processes to separate the bitumen from the oil itself. As we move into the future, we recognize that increasingly this is a highly resource-intensive industry. What happens is that a huge amount of natural gas is used in the extraction process to the point where a relatively clean fuel like natural gas is used to produce a dirty fuel like tar sands crude, which is the worst kind of investment return for the investment made, or energy return for the investment made. And this is the kind of process that we're into with regards to the tar sands. It's like turning gold into lead, as some people say. In addition to that, a great deal of fresh water is used for the extraction and for the separation of the oil from the bitumen. And this is causing, as others have spoken to, a huge impact upon one of the most precious watersheds to be found anywhere in the world today. When we move further on that, we see that there are major production plans that are in the works over the next. It's not just something about no new approvals, I might add. We're dealing with the fact that already there are huge developments that are already approved. And when you look at this chart, you'll see that between 2008 and 2015, there are almost 5 million barrels of oil, crude oil, per day that have been approved as a part of the tar sands production. So these are approvals that are already made. So when we say no new approvals, we have to keep in mind the fact that there is already a humongous amount of damage that is likely to come as a result of those particular projects that are already essentially and fundamentally approved. But of course, with the current economic recession, we may find a bit of a dip in that. But don't be fooled by that by any stretch of the imagination, partly because the bigger companies have already got their investments in place. They may be scaling down a little bit to overcome the tide of the current economic recession, but there is solid commitment, at least for these projects that are mentioned here, and therefore raise profound concerns on all sorts of levels. As was indicated before by the massive pipelines, I think Dave referred to it earlier about the massive pipelines that exist going across the country, but particularly north and south into the United States. These are just the existing pipeline routes. They do not include the Gateway pipeline that is to go across the top to Kitimat and then serve markets elsewhere down the coast. They don't deal with the massive Keystone pipeline that was just recently approved by the National Energy Board, which will bring oil further down south into the Gulf area and also to tie up with other pipeline systems that are going across the country into the Midwest. This is a huge development, and we'll see another map a little bit later that will show even bigger developments that are taking place on that front. And finally, the big corporations. You know, the two initial or pioneering companies, if you will, were Syncrude and Suncor, Suncor being formerly the Sun Oil Company. And they were the pioneering companies, but beyond that, now we have the big U.S. majors, including ExxonMobil, of course, represented through Imperial Oil, ConocoPhillips, and Chevron Texaco are the big players that are involved. And then on top of that, you've got the international players such as Shell Oil and British Petroleum. This is big stuff. These are big stakes, and huge investments into the future have been made. So you may say to yourselves, well, what has this got to do with, what does this have to do at all with our concerns here in Toronto or southwestern Ontario? Well, here I think it is important. And last night we were in Hamilton. We had 300 people talking about this from the steel plants and from the environment community, talking about what is really happening to the economy of Hamilton and of southwestern Ontario. And I think when you take a look at this, we are really facing a really profound set of problems. On our minds today are the job losses. On our minds today is the market crash and what is happening. And I will argue, or would like to argue anyway, that the tar sands itself has triggered much of this crisis. You want to know why we're one of the biggest causes of the current crisis, the economic crisis. I'm not talking about the financial meltdown, but the economic crisis that we're facing and have been facing for 2 or 3 years here in southwestern Ontario in the downturn in the manufacturing sector. Don't look much further than the tar sands boom itself, and here's why. First of all, there has been this huge emphasis on the tar sands being the energy, the great centerpiece of our economy, the new and next energy superpower. As I said, the economic policies in Ottawa have been geared in this direction. There has been a distinct lack of awareness and sensitivity about the manufacturing sector until very recently. And of course, the latest meeting yesterday indicates that there might be a bit of a breakthrough on that front. But I'm sure Jack and other people can tell us much more detail about how difficult it has been to get this government, and for that matter, Parliament itself, to recognize just how serious the problem has been with regards to job losses in the manufacturing sector alone. As we move on from there, we realize that there is a direct connection between the tar sands boom itself, which has been driven, as we all know, by high oil prices and rising high oil prices, and both interact with one another on that. But when you have high oil prices, then you find and recognize that we have a dollar or a loonie that is driven by high oil prices. In other words, it's a petrodollar. And that's how currency markets recognize our dollar now. It's a petrodollar. Up and down in terms of oil prices. If it goes up, then our dollar value of our dollar goes up. If it goes down and plummets, then we're faced with a situation of a lower dollar. And what's been happening, of course, was happening up until a number of months ago, was that the oil prices were going up and up and up. So was the value of the dollar going up and up and up, and as the value of the dollar went up, the competitiveness of our manufacturing exports started to plummet, and plummet badly. In other words, we couldn't sell into the U.S. market as well as we could in the past simply because the value of our dollar was too high. And that's the kind of connection that has been going on here with little or no attention at all. The result has been 400,000 jobs lost in 2002. and we find ourselves in Quebec and Ontario with a manufacturing sector that has been seriously battered as a result of it.